Pa'ahi ahi mai ka makanikili o opu. He opu veo veo o ka poho la e. La'i la'i o mauna ihi ke a ke ai, ke ale ili ili o ke ala kai honua. E ala kai mai, e ki ai mai, e pō mai kai mai, e komo mai ka la'i o nei a aina. He aina ki pa aloha, alohai, alohai, alohai. All right, well, welcome everyone. And yeah, site. Just to kind of orient us right where we are right now. Of course, we're on the Mokupuni, or island of Maui. We are in the Moku, or district of Wailuku, and there are a total of 12 districts on Maui. Ka'anapali was just over this ridgeline here. We are in Wailuku, just beyond Waikapu, just a little bit past Ma'alai, I should say, is the district of Lahaina. Those are the East Maui Moku, or districts. They went up to that mountain, summit of the mountain, Pu'ukui, or Mauna Kahalavai, Pu'ukui being the summit, and that's where all the districts radiated from. Not only did the districts radiate, but the subset of the Moku, the district, was known as an ahupua'a. So anybody within the ahupua'a could extract resources and utilize resources based on their needs from the summit of Pu'ukui, which was a little bit impractical to go all the way up there, but you know, there were some mountain species that say for medicinal uses or for ritual purposes would have been collected very near there, all the way down to the lipo, and that's where you would have collected your limu and your fish and things like that. Waihee, being a very, very sacred site, had the third largest of any of the ahupua'a on Maui, had the third largest number of heiau, or temple sites. On this property alone, we probably had 4. There's 3 that are definitely listed. We think we have uncovered a 4th because of its association with a particular deity. That they said, well, we know that this deity was living in this area, actually in the wetlands, and we found a structure that would very much resemble what we think a heiau would look like for her. Now, we're not sure. You know, a lot of it is speculation, and we do speculate a lot, but we do have a lot of factual information that we've also gathered. The point was now known on USGS maps as Waihee Point, somewhat unpoetically. Traditionally, that was known as Kalai Ho'omano. Ho'omano in Hawaiian means the increase. And so Ho'omano, it may be a reference to the fact that you're on the Nawai'eha. So there are 4 rivers in the central area of Maui, going from this way out here, Waikapu, Heiau or Wailuku, Wai'ehu, and Waihee. Those 4 rivers were, according to at least Handy and Handy, who wrote sort of the Native Planters of Old Hawaii, kind of the definitive book about Hawaiian agriculture, said this was the most productive area in the entire state, agriculturally at least, the most productive. So if you controlled Wailuku, or if you controlled the Nawai'eha, politically that gave you a huge advantage. So it kind of comes down to, why is the entire archipelago known as Hawaii? Is a complete fluke. Is because of this really powerful chief by the name of Kamehameha and his warrior Ke Kuhaupio. If you had arrived in 1778, which they did, which Cook arrived in 1778, and you had made a bet on who would have conquered the entire archipelago, and what would the archipelago be called because of that? It'd be Maui. Yeah. And you'd lose, unfortunately. But that's because you had this incredible chief by the name of Kahekili, and Kahekili ruled the Nawai'eha. He conquered Maui. He then conquered Lanai, Molokai, Oahu. He conquered a good portion of Kohala at one point, the Kohala district of the Big Island, and he was making alliances with Kauai. And then this chief by the name of Kamehameha really changed everything. So, I don't know, too many details beyond that, but so we're on the edge of the Nawai'eha, beginning at this river right here. As you come around the shoreline, that point over there, known is our other property boundary, and that point was known historically as Kalai o ke Honi. Honi, of course, in Hawaiian means the pressing of noses. It's a greeting of affection. Sometimes translated as kiss, although that's not really what its function was like that. But the Honi was a pressing of noses. It got its name because in the Battle of 1790, the Battle of Kipanivai, which is the battle that took place up Heiau Valley, where most of Maui's army was slaughtered under the chief Kalani Kupule. Kamehameha the Great's army camped out there, and the reconciliation ceremonies with the remainder of Palani Kupule's army. Palani Kupule had left, he departed for Oahu under his father, which at that time was ruled by his father. Kamehameha the Great army held there. Kalani Kupule's the remainder of his army reconciled with Kamehameha the Great there. That reconciliation was sealed with the hunmi, pressing of noses. So that's sort of that's the origin of that location. Yeah, you can see there's people kind of coming in and out. That's more or less the parking area. We always leave that open. It happens to be very close to the site where Huapuhukaina's enclosure, known as Niua, was located. We think at least, because in 1987 they did an archaeological dig, found a very well-preserved imu, dated some of the carbon in the midden, the shells, and came up with a date of 941. There's a possibility that in the last 25 years or so that they could recalibrate that and get a different date. But I say 941. It wasn't like a bing, you know.
Right.
Actually, the range was something like 878 to 1000, 20 or something like that. And what they did is they just kind of picked the midpoint. That's how they did it. So I say 941, but take that with a big grain of salt. A lot of mythological connections on this island, or on this property. Here we have sort of our main area where we're starting to restore the ecosystem. So there you can see the bowl of the wetlands, known as the Kapoho Wetlands. 27 acres in total. A number of endangered species, including the Hawaiian stilt, the heiau, and the Hawaiian coot, the alai ke'o. But yeah, and then directly makai, or shore side of that, is the Kapoho village. So you can walk. This is in Hawaiian, but known as the makaha. Turns out, of course, you can imagine, during the March 11th tsunami, the one that devastated Japan, this is right where the tsunami came up, in through here, and filled up the fish pond. Filled it up. Yeah. Of course, the native species, being co-adapted to events like that, did fine. The non-native species did not do fine. So from our perspective in this area, it was actually beneficial. Ecosystems can withstand disturbance, particularly when they're co-evolved to withstand this. Of course, it was a tragedy for many, many levels, but from an ecosystem's perspective here. So the way that Hawaiian fish ponds function, traditional aquaculture, is a 7-acre inland fish pond, fresh water. So it was fed from the spot where we were up above, Pe'e Loko. There was an auwai, or an aqueduct, that went around the back side of the dune, came around the front side of the dune. Now, think of that as an engineering feat, because you're building an aqueduct on sand. So they lined it with rock. There was still a lot of groundwater penetration, I'm sure, through sandy soils. So what they did is, all along the base they built taro patches. So all that water that would have leaked through would have been collected and used for, in fact, if we had time to go through, you could actually see the old taro patches right at the base of the auwai, or the aqueduct. But nonetheless, probably about 5 to 7 million gallons made it into the fish pond every day. 5 to 7 million, based on the size. We don't actually have a solid number for how many million gallons we're in, but about that size, based on the depth and the width of the auwai. It would have been in the fish pond, and then the outflow would have been here. The outflow is also where the fish swim up. So the way that amphibious Hawaiian fishes, particularly the opu, which are the goby species, when they hit fresh water, when they spend their larval stage in the ocean, when they hit these spots where you have freshwater intrusion, they swim up. As do other fish species, saltwater fish species like the barracuda and the jacks. Estuaries. If functionally, as an ecosystem, this would have been an estuary. Hawaiians realized that, and so they built their fish ponds to mimic those estuaries. So they would come right up through here. And we can kind of take a look, but within the fish pond there are mounds. Those mounds were still visible when we cleared it. Those mounds would have been how they would have planted on top of they would have planted on top of them, and that would have been a 7-acre fish pond. Would have produced a lot of both fish and taro. So that would have been the area where the cultural sites are. So this way is Kapoho Village. as I mentioned before, 1464 to 1814 are the dates, rough dates that we have, carbon 14. 4 of Maui's ruling chiefs lived here at different times, including the story Waihee, where the 2 children of Pi'ilani. Now, Pi'ilani is a name you hear all the time, right? The road, the Honua Pi'ilani Highway and the Pi'ilani Highway. Pi'ilani was the first chief to unite all 12 districts of Maui. And he didn't unite them through warfare, he united them through building projects. Most concretely in the roads. The road that you see, the highway, the Pi'ilani Highway, is mainly named in honor of him, but it takes the rough route that he built. But other things include such things as this, an inland fish pond. 7 acres here. Keeping in mind that a taro patch, according to Handy and Handy, 1 taro patch can, 1 acre of high production lo'ikalo can produce 26,000 pounds of taro. So 1 acre, you figure this is 7 acres. Now granted, this wouldn't have been as intensely cultivated just because you would have had, certain portions of fish. But this right here is sort of interesting. This is this is where the nets were stored. There was a house here up until 1946. There was a house on top of this little pit where they held the nets. Now we know 1946 because in 1946, on the 1st of April 1946, there was a big tsunami. But that house, unfortunately, had been sitting empty for about 5 years before that because in 1941, the military came down and said martial law, and martial law pushed everybody away from the ocean. That really ended. We talk about all the changes that happened in Hawaii from 1778 through today. But in many ways, in the Kua'aina, in sort of the backcountry, life kind of continued more or less as it had always been. There were major changes. Don't get me wrong. Changes in religion and ways of thinking. But in many ways, those life patterns continued. For example, the family that lived here had this property. They also had their taro patches up in Waihee Valley at a place called Waiau. So they would move back and forth as needed up until 1941 and raise their taro up in the valley, fish, and store their nets here. And the canoes used to be, brought up on shore right here. And we know that because one of the kupuna who still lives in Waihee, who comes down and helps us almost every Friday, it's our volunteer day, it's Friday, when she helped us clear this area, she was 5 years old.
Wow.
And she remembered it. I mean, she knew. It was kind of like one of those ho'ailona or chicken skin moments where we were clearing this area of all the invasive species that had grown up around it, and you could just barely see it. And she was telling us as we were clearing, her stories about her family and the canoes being out here. We had finished cleaning and we kind of took a break, and she had told us that her aumakua, her family god, being the shark, the black-tipped shark that kind of swims out here, and a whole swarm of black-tipped sharks kind of came out right after we had cleared it. So, again, that's in Hawaiian that would be known as a ho'ailona, sort of an appearance by a sacred animal. And so, that's it. So these 2 hala trees, right about the time that we got it cleared, 2 of her brothers passed away. They were in their 70s and 80s. Late 70s and late and early 70s. Anyway, her 2 brothers passed away, and we went up to Waiau, collected 2 seeds of the hala trees that were up there and planted them here. Hala in Hawaiian means to pass, so we did that in memory of them, like to pass away. And so oftentimes in places that Hawaiians want to memorialize someone, they'll plant hala trees. And so, but that's, sort of she's still around. In fact, hopefully she'll get to go out tonight. We asked her to come, but she's real hila. She's kind of shy, so sometimes she doesn't come. But anyway, in